What you are about to witness is one of the most explosive political confrontations ever recorded in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. When Victoria Vicky Romano, the 45-year-old wife of Providence Mayor Anthony Romano, strode in with the imperious confidence that came from years of assuming her husband's office made her untouchable, she made the catastrophic mistake of threatening a sitting judge. Just 3 weeks earlier, she had received a citation for parking in a fire lane outside an exclusive waterfront bistro during a $1,000 per plate political fundraiser, but she believed her status exempted her from trivial municipal enforcement. Dressed in an expensive designer suit with jewelry that gleamed under the courtroom lights, her every move radiated the superiority complex of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. What Vicky did not realize was that she was about to face a judge politically independent for 35 years, who had zero tolerance for politicians or their families assuming their elected office granted special privileges. That morning, the courtroom charged with political electricity would witness her arrogance unravel, an event that would not only humiliate her, but also threaten her husband's political career and ignite one of the most notorious corruption scandals in Providence history, proving once again that no political position is above the law. As Vicky approaches the defendant's stand, her body language immediately conveys a confrontational attitude. She shows no humility, constantly glances at her expensive watch as if this proceeding is a waste of her precious time, and holds herself with the posture of someone who believes she is doing the court a favor simply by appearing. Victoria Romano, the court clerk, announces the case from the docket, and Vicky steps forward with clear impatience, her political connections evident in her demeanor, assuming everyone in the courtroom knows exactly who she is and why she matters. Judge Caprio looks up from his paperwork with the practiced gaze of someone who has faced every form of political arrogance imaginable, including politician spouses who mistake marital status for legal immunity. Mrs. Romano, Judge Caprio, begins, his voice carrying the calm authority of 35 years of independence from political pressure. You are charged with parking in a designated fire lane in violation of City Ordinance 1528. This violation occurred on March 2nd at 7:45 p.m. outside the waterfront bistro. How do you plead? Vicky's response immediately signals that this case will escalate into a political showdown unlike anything the courtroom has seen. Your Honor, she says, her tone laced with political condescension and barely concealed irritation. I plead not guilty because this citation reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of the practical realities of municipal governance and the operational necessities of political leadership. Judge Caprio sets down his pen, a warning sign for defendants who think they can lecture him on governance. Mrs. Romano, were you attending a municipal function or conducting official city business at the time of the violation? He asks. Your Honor, I was attending a political fundraiser for my husband's re-election campaign, Vicky responds. As the mayor's wife, my presence at such events is essential for effective municipal leadership and community engagement. The courtroom falls silent. Vicky has just argued that her husband's political campaign activities should exempt her from fire safety regulations. Mrs. Romano, do you hold any elected office or official position within the city of Providence? Vicky's irritation becomes apparent as she realizes she is being pressed for specifics about her actual authority. Your Honor, as the mayor's wife, I serve in an unofficial but crucial capacity, supporting municipal governance and representing the city at key community events, she responds. Judge Caprio's expression remains calm, but experienced. Court observers recognize the signs of a judge preparing to deliver a civic lesson on the difference between political influence and legal authority. Mrs. Romano, can you cite the specific municipal code or state statute that exempts mayor's spouses from fire safety regulations? He asks. Vicky hesitates, clearly not expecting to be challenged on legal details by a municipal court judge. Your Honor, I believe you're missing the bigger picture of how municipal leadership functions in practice, she replies. The silence that follows is palpable. Vicky has just implied that Judge Caprio lacks an understanding of municipal governance. But she continues, committing what may be the biggest political blunder of her life. Your Honor, Vicky says, her tone taking on the air of someone explaining obvious facts to someone who clearly doesn't get it. I've been involved in Providence politics for 15 years as the mayor's wife. I understand municipal authority and civic leadership better than someone who sits in a courtroom all day handling minor infractions. Shocked murmurs ripple through the courtroom. Vicky has just insulted Judge Caprio's expertise and suggested that political status supersedes judicial authority. Then, leaning forward with unmasked political arrogance, she adds, "Your Honor, I think you need to consider the practical implications here. My husband is the mayor of this city. He appoints members to various municipal boards and commissions. The city's budget impacts court funding. I suggest you consider carefully how you are handling this case. Vicky has just threatened a sitting judge with political retaliation. She has crossed a line that could not only destroy her husband's career, but ignite the largest political scandal in Providence history. What Judge Caprio does next will methodically dismantle Vicky's political arrogance and potentially end Mayor Romano's political future forever." Judge Caprio slowly rises from his bench, an unprecedented gesture signaling that something monumental is about to occur. He removes his glasses with deliberate care and fixes Vicky with the calm, measured expression of someone preparing to deliver a political lesson of a lifetime. "Mrs. Romano," Judge Caprio says, his voice perfectly controlled but carrying the full authority of judicial independence, "did you just threaten this court with political retaliation?" Vicky, still emboldened by what she misinterprets as judicial hesitation, doubles down on her attempt at political intimidation. "Your Honor, I'm merely pointing out the realities of how municipal governance functions. Political leaders have responsibilities and relationships that extend beyond individual court cases." Judge Caprio nods slowly, as though meticulously noting Vicky's threats for future reference. "I see. Mrs. Romano, since you have threatened this court and questioned my understanding of municipal authority, allow me to explain how our system of government truly works." He moves toward his constitutional law books resting on his desk. "Mrs. Romano, you mentioned that your husband appoints members to municipal boards. Are you familiar with the constitutional principles of separation of powers and judicial independence?" Vicky hesitates, realizing she may have walked straight into a constitutional trap. "Your Honor, I understand that political leadership requires coordination between different branches of government," she responds cautiously. "That's not what I asked, Mrs. Romano. Are you familiar with the constitutional requirement that the judicial branch remain independent from political pressure and intimidation?" Vicky's confident demeanor begins to falter as she realizes she is being systematically outmaneuvered by someone who understands constitutional law far better than she understands political influence. "Your Honor, I never intended to threaten anyone," she stammers. "Mrs. Romano," Judge Caprio interrupts, his voice gaining the full weight of constitutional authority. "Threatening a judge with political retaliation is not merely inappropriate, it is potentially criminal. It constitutes judicial intimidation, a felony under Rhode Island state law." The arrogance drains from Vicky's face as she comprehends that she may have just committed a serious crime in full view of the courtroom and on record. "Furthermore, Mrs. Romano, you implied that I do not understand municipal governance. Let me clarify my qualifications for you. I have been practicing municipal law for 45 years and have served on this bench for 35 years. I have worked with 12 different mayors, including your husband. I understand municipal authority far better than politicians who assume their spouse's election makes them experts on government." But Judge Caprio is only beginning. What he reveals next will utterly dismantle Vicky's case and expose the full extent of her political arrogance. He reaches for a thick file from his desk. Mrs. Romano, since you have threatened this court and claimed political authority, I took the liberty of reviewing your parking and traffic violation history." Vicky's face goes completely pale. She clearly had not anticipated her driving record being scrutinized. "According to city records, you have received 11 parking violations in the past 2 years. How many of those tickets did you pay, Mrs. Romano?" The courtroom falls utterly silent as Vicky realizes the magnitude of her legal and political miscalculation. "Your Honor, I'm not certain of the exact number," she begins. "I'll provide the exact number for you. Mrs. Romano, you paid 0. Judge Caprio states with precise authority. "According to these records, you have ignored 11 municipal citations, accumulating $2,200 in unpaid fines and penalties." Vicky attempts to speak, but Judge Caprio continues with devastating precision. "Furthermore, Mrs. Romano, city parking enforcement has documented 17 separate occasions in which you used your political status to evade citations. including twice when you told parking officers, and I quote, "Do you know who my husband is?" This ticket will disappear. Vicky's political arrogance vanishes entirely, replaced by genuine fear as she realizes her pattern of misconduct is being exposed in open court. "Your Honor, those incidents were misunderstandings," she stammers. "Mrs. Romano, threatening parking officers with political retaliation is not a misunderstanding. It is an abuse of political power. And now you have threatened a sitting judge with the same corrupt tactics," Judge Caprio says, his voice growing stronger, more authoritative. "You have suggested that your husband's position as mayor grants you special privileges. You have threatened this court with political consequences. You have demonstrated a pattern of leveraging political influence to avoid legal accountability. What Judge Caprio announces next will shock everyone and ignite the largest political scandal in Providence history. Mrs. Romano, not only am I finding you guilty of the fire lane violation and imposing the full $200 fine plus court costs, but I'm also holding you in contempt of court for threatening judicial independence." Vicky's mouth drops open in shock, but Judge Caprio is not finished. "Furthermore, Mrs. Romano, I am directing court administration to forward a complete transcript of today's proceedings to the Rhode Island Attorney General's office for investigation into judicial intimidation, political corruption, and abuse of public trust." The courtroom hums with disbelief as Vicky grasps the implications for her husband's political career. "But most importantly," Judge Caprio continues, standing with the full weight of his judicial authority, "I am referring this matter to the Providence City Council Ethics Committee and recommending a full investigation into Mayor Romano's administration regarding the systematic misuse of political position by family members." Vicky looks as if she might faint, the full magnitude of her political downfall settling over her. "Your Honor, you cannot destroy my husband's career over a parking ticket," she protests. "Mrs. Romano, I'm not destroying your husband's career. You destroyed your husband's career the moment you chose to threaten a sitting judge while demonstrating a pattern of political corruption that directly reflects on his administration." Judge Caprio steps closer to the defendant's stand, his full constitutional authority on display. "Mrs. Romano, let me share something with you about political power and judicial independence. I have served under 12 mayors during my 35 years on this bench. I have witnessed political families come and go. I have observed politicians who believe themselves untouchable learn that in this courtroom, the Constitution matters far more than campaign contributions." The judge's voice adopts the tone of a civics professor addressing a student, failing in ethical responsibility. "Your husband holds office at the pleasure of the voters, not at the pleasure of this court. But when political families employ intimidation, threats, and corruption to evade legal accountability, they undermine the very democratic system that granted them power in the first place." Vicky stands frozen, her earlier political swagger completely shattered. "You walked into my courtroom today believing you could intimidate a judge with your husband's political position. Instead, you have demonstrated precisely why political corruption is dangerous to democracy and why judicial independence is essential to constitutional government." Judge Caprio returns to his bench, preparing to deliver his final political judgment. A mayor's wife who threatens judges is the same political family that threatens citizens. A politician whose spouse believes laws do not apply to them is a politician who assumes democracy exists to serve their personal interests rather than the public good. The judge picks up his gavel. "Mrs. Romano, your fine for the fire lane violation is $200. Your contempt of court citation carries an additional $500 penalty and 40 hours of community service. Most importantly, you will explain to the Attorney General, the Ethics Committee, and the voters why a sitting judge found your conduct corrupt and threatening to democratic governance." Vicky's voice drops to a near whisper. "Your Honor, please." "I am not finished, Mrs. Romano. You mentioned that your husband's position affects court funding and municipal appointments. Let me explain what truly affects judicial independence: the Constitution, the rule of law, and the principle that no political position grants immunity from legal accountability." Judge Caprio scans the packed courtroom, which includes several political reporters who arrived expecting a routine traffic case. "Let this serve as a lesson to every political family watching. Your elected office is a privilege granted by the people, not a license to threaten judges, ignore laws, or corrupt the system that entrusted you with power. When political families believe they are above the law, democracy itself is at risk." He turns his gaze back to Vicky, who stands with her head bowed, utterly humbled politically. Mrs. Romano, I strongly urge you and your husband to reflect on the difference between public service and personal privilege, between political leadership and political corruption, and between representing the people and exploiting them. Judge Caprio raises his gavel. Court is adjourned. The gavel comes down with absolute finality, but the story does not end there. What unfolded in the following hours would prove precisely why threatening judicial authority inevitably leads to political ruin. As the courtroom emptied, Vicky remained alone at the defendant's table, staring at the citation that had just cost her $700 and jeopardized her husband's political career. The political privilege that had shielded her for 15 years had been systematically dismantled by a 76-year-old judge who understood that democracy functions only when everyone, including political families, follows the law. Political reporter Sarah Chen, who witnessed the entire proceeding, spoke to her colleagues as they prepared their coverage. "I've covered Providence politics for 20 years, she told Channel 12 News, and I've never seen anything like this. A sitting judge just documented a pattern of political corruption by the mayor's family in open court." As Vicky left the courthouse, reporters who had captured her judicial downfall followed her with cameras. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from political advisors, campaign staff, and party officials who had watched the live stream. The video of her political humiliation would be viewed more than 5 million times within the first 48 hours. Political blogs analyzed Judge Caprio's systematic exposure of Vicky's corruption as a textbook example of judicial independence checking political abuse. Law schools began using the case as a teaching tool on the importance of separation of powers and constitutional governance. But the real impact was felt immediately in Providence City Hall. Within hours, the Rhode Island Attorney General's office announced a formal investigation into the Romano administration. The Providence City Council called an emergency ethics hearing. 3 major local newspapers' editorial boards called for Mayor Romano's resignation. By evening, Mayor Anthony Romano held a press conference. Standing beside his wife, he announced that he would not seek re-election and would cooperate fully with all investigations into his administration. "My wife's conduct in court today does not represent the values of public service or the respect for law that should characterize political leadership," he said. The Romano political dynasty, built over 15 years, collapsed in a single morning because a mayor's wife thought she could threaten a judge. 6 months later, the Attorney General's investigation concluded that the Romano administration had created a culture of political privilege and legal exemption that extended far beyond parking tickets. Mayor Romano completed his term, but was effectively a political pariah, with his party refusing to support him for any future office. Former Mayor Romano's attempt to rebuild his political career was a study in the permanent consequences of corruption. No political organization would support him due to his family's documented pattern of legal intimidation and abuse of office. Years later, political science students would study the Romano case as an example of how quickly political careers can be destroyed when families mistake elected office for legal immunity. Professor Janet Walsh at Brown University regularly tells her students, "Judge Caprio didn't end Mayor Romano's career to make a political point. He ended it to protect democracy from political families who think they're above the law." The video of that Wednesday morning became one of the most watched political accountability moments ever recorded, shared millions of times across social media platforms. Political science programs around the world used it as training material about the importance of judicial independence and the dangers of political corruption. But for those who knew Judge Caprio personally, it was simply another example of what made him special. The ability to defend constitutional principles against political pressure, to educate through justice, and to transform political arrogance into democratic accountability. He proved that judicial independence isn't just a legal principle. It's the foundation that prevents democracy from becoming a system where political families rule rather than serve. In a time when political corruption often goes unchecked, Judge Frank Caprio showed that constitutional government works when judges refuse to be intimidated, when courts remain independent of political pressure, and when everyone, including mayors' wives, learns that threatening judges is the fastest way to destroy everything political families have worked to build.